So thank you, everyone. Aloha from the North Pacific, from the big island of Hawaii. We are 23 hours behind you, so a very happy Wednesday afternoon from Hawaii. And thank you for this invitation and the opportunity to present on the topic of partnerships and understanding the World Bank. And by extension, that also means understanding the basic principles of how international financing institutions or the multilateral banks work and operate. So, for example, the Asian Development Bank works very much along the same lines as what I'm going to present to you today. Just a bit of background. So when people talk about the World Bank Group, it's actually 5 institutions. I am going to focus just on the IBRD and the IDA, which is we provide financing to governments. So when you talk about a World Bank project, it is actually a government project. It is not actually the World Bank implementing the project. But we also have IFC, which invests in the private sector. So we invested in Planet. So the satellite company Planet had startup financing from our private sector. And we also have dispute settlement, arbitration services, and a guarantee agency. The World Bank is organized, and again, I'm talking about the part that finances government. We are organized by regions. There are 6 regions, so I am assigned to the East Asia Pacific region. And the important thing is that financing is allocated through the Ministry of Finance. So any engagement, any formal engagement with the World Bank, as well as Asian Development Bank and others, is actually initiated through the Ministry of Finance. The World Bank, we have more than 100 country offices, and I come from the Sustainable Development Group, looking at urban issues, disaster risk management, resilience, and land. And our portfolio is currently $40 billion US. How to engage or how to even start understanding where entry points are with the World Bank is to look at the country partnership strategy or framework. This is done every 5 years, and it outlines the agreement and the discussions between the government, led by the Ministry of Finance, and the World Bank on what types of investments will the World Bank money be used for. Here's an example from Mongolia. So throughout this presentation, I will use some recent work we have done in Mongolia on geospatial infrastructure. So the country partnership frameworks or the strategies are available online. So each country can go to the World Bank website for that country and find the country partnership strategy or framework. And then how do we work with countries? We focus mainly on low and middle income countries. And one of the new areas or newer areas is financing geospatial information and infrastructure. But we have, and our clients are facing some investment challenges, particularly because the geospatial community and the information infrastructure, we're competing with well-established business lines of the more traditional or hard infrastructure, such as transport and energy. And while recognizing that significant financing is needed, it's difficult to convince the decision makers. The data aren't there to say, what is the return on investment? What are the benefits coming out of investing in the information infrastructure and particularly in the spatial data infrastructure? So some of the work we've been doing is focusing on the evidence that is needed to justify that financing. And this discussion started in 2017, which led to the strategic partnership between the World Bank and UNSD, the Committee of Experts on Global Geospatial Information Management. How do we help countries think about investment, understand what is needed in an investment plan, and ultimately get the spatial data infrastructure they need for their country? And through this partnership, the goal was to develop an overarching geospatial framework that countries could reference, and then to assist countries to prepare and implement this framework through country level action and investment plans. 1 year later, the Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, the IGIF, was adopted by member states. UNGGIM, the Secretariat and the committee, was instrumental in moving this forward, getting this adoption of the strategic framework in less than 1 year. And it provides this holistic view to help countries, mainly lower income, middle income countries. But what we're seeing is high income countries are using this framework as well to review their geospatial plans. For example, the UK Geospatial Commission references the IGIF in reviewing some of their strategies. You see here these puzzle pieces. These are the 9 strategic pathways of the IGIF to ensure this holistic view. So it's not just about technology. It's not just about data and systems. It also is very important to understand the governance aspects as well as the people and capacity aspects. So the IGIF is intended for a very holistic, cross-government, into the private sector view of what is needed for geospatial information, infrastructure, and investments. At the World Bank, we've now come up with a 4-step methodology to implement the IGIF. We've developed a series of templates and tools. These templates and tools are freely available online to use. I will share the link at the end. But it's a very systematic way to approach implementing the IGIF. And the very first step just starts with the diagnostic or the baseline assessment. Where is the country today? It asks a series of relatively simple questions across those 9 strategic pathways. It's intended to be a relatively rapid assessment and then to come up with some sort of scoring about what the current status is. And this is what we then use to engage with broader stakeholders. So we start with the basic holders of geospatial data, so the National Mapping Agency, the Hydrographic Office, but then this also allows to expand out cross-sectorally into all ministries, departments, and even the private sector, which have or use geospatial data. So the basis of this stakeholder meeting brings the stakeholders together, and it can either initiate coordination if it's not already happening or enhance it. The second step then is to look at the strategic alignment to policy and business drivers. This is very important not to prioritize investments and actions, but also to engage the decision makers. What is the priority for the government? What is the priority of the Minister of Finance? And at what point does geospatial information support the goals of those policies? And each country's different. In Mongolia, it happened to be e-government and citizen services. That was our entry point and the focus of the government. Certainly during COVID, the outbreaks for disease and monitoring that was very important. Where we are going to now on sort of our next step, which we will explain in the next presentation, Andrew Coote will explain, is the marine sector. So starting to integrate land and marine and what that means for improved planning and management of resources. The third step then looks at the socioeconomic impact and the benefits. So again, we look across various sectors. You can see in the pink. Again, marine, I just want to highlight, is something new, both that UNGGIM and the IGIF is looking at, and we as the World Bank are adapting our tools to be able to integrate the marine sector. And climate change adaptation and marine spatial planning are coming out as key use cases where there really can be definite impact and benefits by investing in geospatial information. And then you can see down in the green where we start to see the action and investments that are needed. The important thing, particularly from the geospatial side, is we need to learn to speak the language of the economists and the financiers. So being able to qualify and quantify the impacts and the benefits across the public and the private sector is very important. So as our methodology, identifies the impact, looks at what the evidence is, what is the methodology used. This is how the economists can understand what the analysis is saying, and then out of that, who are the beneficiaries, and then actually able to quantify the impacts. We then put that information into the World Bank standard infrastructure project model, from the project lifespan, the discount rate. All of these are things that World Bank management and the Ministry of Finance can understand and start then competing or comparing with the more traditional hard infrastructure, and this need to prioritize and to be able to manage scarce government resources. So it looks at, what is the return on the return on investment, the net present value, again, the language of the economist, so that good decisions can be made on investments. We have some additional tools because the socioeconomic impact assessment is not easy to do. It is important to bring in economists. So we've provided some help and some guidance for national mapping agencies, for the hydrographic organizations to be able to use. And finally, we come up with the action and investment plan. And here you can see in Mongolia, again, the vision was this geo-driven e-government and innovation. And by going through this process and the very detailed investment plan, the financing was then provided through the new World Bank Digital Development Project. So whether a country is trying to convince the Ministry of Finance to use own resources, that's usually the first step. That investment plan can help. If capital level investments are needed, then you can come to the World Bank or Asian Development Bank or others. But that document does provide the financing justification, or something what we would call a bankable project. So here you can see how this very detailed investment plan that comes out. And it's important to understand, is you can see in the red circle, is it a capital or recurrent cost? And we don't do this just for the World Bank. We actually look at what the funding source could be. We see in many countries where we've worked in where it takes not only the government targeting resources, but then all of the multilateral, bilateral donors coming in and picking up pieces, because it usually is quite a hefty investment plan into the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, particularly starting to talk about investment in data. Whether it's digitizing the data, capturing the data, improving it, integrating systems, usually does require initially quite a bit of capital level investment. I just want to note that, we mostly work at the national level, but increasingly we're also starting to look at working at the subnational level, whether it's with states or regions, or in this case, municipalities or cities. So the tools have been used in Ho Chi Minh City, in Tirana, Albania, in some other subnational level cases as well. So here you can see in the past 2 to 3 years where this methodology is being used. It is a cross-section of high income, middle income, low income countries. And several partners have come in and using this methodology. We also provide some knowledge and learning materials. So we have 5 modules about the IGIF. So this can help people understand at their own pace, self-paced online courses. What is the value of geospatial information? What is the framework? How to use the framework to implement creating a country level action plan, and then we do have a special tutorial on the socioeconomic benefits analysis and running through how to conduct that work. And it is all openly available on our Open Learning Campus. You can see the website here. And finally, just a reference to where you can find these tools and templates. You can also feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to share them with you. We also do have some examples of the 4 studies. Moldova, for example, is freely available online. Some of the Moldova work is Mongolia work is available. And now our next step, one of the specific countries we're moving into and working with is the Philippines. I think Captain Carter from the Philippines is joining us online today. And the focus there is integrating the marine aspects. So working with IHO, with OGC, UKHO, and some of the others to ensure that we're thinking holistically about integrating land and marine data and the tools and templates to help countries to use that. And Andrew Coote will talk more about the work we're doing in the Philippines in the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was very comprehensive. I certainly have learned a lot and much more aware of World Bank, what it is and what you do, and absolutely agree in terms of the language of the economist. I picked that up, so I really get that. Return on investment, net present value. And I'm just amazed at the available tools and information that is online and that we will need to access. And I was aware of the Open Learning Campus and the 5 modules, and some of my colleagues have taken that, but that's a good entry into IGIF and understanding it, but also the geospatial information and data and how important that is. So it's something I think for the Pacific Island countries here to take note of and consider in terms of where to for them, and we're going to hear about that implementation in the Pacific Islands during this agenda item. But are there any questions for Catherine from the meeting? So I don't see any hands raised. Oh yes, there is a question there. Andy Coote, please go ahead.
So it's really just to clarify, and it comes from a conversation I had with Lionel actually.
Is that microphone turned on? Just hold it a bit closer.
A bit closer.
No, it's not turned on. You need to turn it on.
I never was any good with technology.
That's it, right.
So conversation I had with Lionel about capacity building in the hydrographic world, and one of the things that you might want to comment on this, Catherine, is that I think you've stressed that the World Bank works at a country level, so it's all to do with these country level partnerships, and that's the entry point, rather than necessarily taking funding which is applied by another organisation like IHO in this case on an international basis. And I don't know whether, Catherine, that is always the case, or are there initiatives that do allow you to span across different countries and to relate to organisations like IHO?
Sure, that's a very good question. In the end, the World Bank is a bank. So most of our projects are loans, highly concessional loans, but they are loans. There are some grants involved, but again, those grants are directed through the government and for the government priorities based on that country partnership framework. Where we see, so for example, IHO, we would see them perhaps sometimes as a partner through some of the grants, but also, for example, if there's standards work to be done, they would actually, let's say, apply or bid on the project, that the implementation of it. So the types of partnerships with IHO, maybe to set standards, maybe to work on standards. But in the end, it really is country level engagement because of the dynamics of being a bank and having to operate like a bank.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Catherine. That was very clear and understood. Appreciate that, providing that clarity. Any other questions from anybody? Okay, so thank you very much, Catherine. We really appreciate your presentation. And there's a lot to think about there. And I think there's that's going on in the room at the moment. So we're going to progress now to the next presentation.